Hello everybody and welcome to another exciting list video. We have stepped away from our regular scheduled programming of the cards that define classes to bring you a video with 7 tips for deck building. We have built a lot of decks for this game, and we have built good decks, we have built great decks, and we've also each built bad decks. And we have learned a lot from all of our decks to,
it's not later either. We still build bad decks.
Yes. we do. We don't build great decks anymore, though. Those no.
That's not fun.
Yeah, so today we are here to give you 7 tips on how to build better decks and also just for how you approach deck building. So why don't we go with tip number 1, which is nice and simple. Know the role your deck needs to fill. So what are the 4, generally the 4 roles that we define for this game?
Well, we have our fighter, and we have our clover, and we have our flex, and we have our support.
Mm-hmm. So fighter and clover is pretty straightforward. Fighters, their job is to kill enemies. Yes. Yeah. Generally, how Travis defined it in our How to Win series, which if you haven't watched, you should. Mm-hmm. There is the fighter and the clover each need to reliably do more than player damage or clue getting on average on a turn. Yeah.
So with your 3 actions, you should be able to do, in a 4-player game, your fighter's got to do at least 4 damage.
Yes. Yeah,
your clover's got to be able to get at least, maybe not 4 clues, 3 clues is sometimes good enough.
Yeah, but you want to, on average, stick around to, getting 4 by the time the campaign's done.
Yeah.
The flex is a little bit more complex than that. You generally need to get half player amount of those things.
Yeah, the thing that the flex is best at is supporting the sort of the clover and the fighter, where a lot of the things in the game have odd numbers. So if the fighter ends up needing to kill a 3 health enemy and a 2 health enemy, they can't put out 5 damage that turn. They can put out 4. That leaves 1 point left, and the flex can just ding the enemy for that last damage. Same thing with clues. You have 6 or 3-player clues on a location. Between 2 people, there's 6 there, and there's a horrible example. I pulled numbers out of my ass. I was like, no location has 3-player clues. And I was like, that's 12. That's way too big for this example. Pull it back to 2 players. Why are you playing a flex and 2-player? But yeah, no, there's a single clue left on a location. You just pick it up with your lockpicks or whatever.
Yeah, you'll see that commonly in especially 3 players, because there is 1-player clue on a location.
Yeah.
And then there's the clover grabs 2 and says, I'm gonna go over here and get the rest, and the flex is like, no worries, I got this clue.
Yeah.
The other thing the flex is very important about is they if things start going bad, the flex is usually the first one who can offer a solution.
Yeah, they're like the Band-Aid.
Yeah. They're like, okay, no, you drew an enemy, I'll handle this enemy, you can deal with the big guy, right?
Yeah, or oh shit, it's Jaeger, I'll evade him for this turn, or so you guys can set up for it, or there's a bad treachery in play, maybe they're the one who is playing Alter Fate or can make the brain test to get rid of it or something.
Yeah. And then the support is very similar to a flex, because they still want to do those things, but they
do them in some capacity.
But they generally impact the game in other positive ways. For example, they can... A good example, we actually have a great example now, Carson Sinclair, right? His support to get more clues is to give more actions to your other people who are better at it.
Yeah, the difference between a support and a flex is a flex kind of picks up the pieces that the clover and the other players leave behind, whereas the support makes them better at their job to the point where they can do it themselves. Get your tail out of my face, you asshole.
No, he wants to show his butt to the camera. He immediately did that. And you might be asking, why are we talking about these in detail? Because it is the most important part of your deck.
Yeah, what you do and what you intend to do is how do you know what cards to put in your deck if you don't know what you're doing?
Yep.
You're just going to pick them at random?
Yeah, because every time that we start a conversation here for what we're going to do for a campaign, it's what are you going to do, right? And that's the question.
Is there any particular investigator you want to play, which frequently leads them to a certain role? And then those conversations frequently end with at least one person be like, well, I guess I'll just play some kind of clue getter.
Yeah.
Or I'll play some kind of fighter or whatever.
Yeah. And because then it determines what your entire being on is, and then you can ask each question you put in your deck. you can start by being like, how does this help me fulfill my role?
Yep.
So like, I'm the goon. I need weapons and things that deal damage, and that's going to do it. And then when you're the flex, you can be like, I don't need as much as I did when I was a goon last time, and it's still, it just is like the foundation for your deck.
Yep.
Yeah. The next tip we got here is a doozy. This is probably like the biggest tip, which is follow the great deck pyramid.
Yeah.
We love
great deck pyramid.
we love the deck pyramid here. So, well, I'll let you, because this is your...
Okay. Well, this ties into like what we just said about the purpose being the base of your deck. And like most pyramids, you can't build the top layers without... I mean, you can put them on top of a shitty lower layer, but it's not going to be a good pyramid.
Yeah.
If you want a nice solid pyramid, then, your base, your purpose has to be very solid. You have to know what you're trying to do with your deck. If you're killing monsters, you're the flex, you're getting clues. And next step is our economy, which you need to be able... It doesn't matter what your deck is trying to do. If you don't have the cards and the resources to play them, then, you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you need that. And then we finally have our function, which is your deck actually doing what it does. And this is the cards that enable you to do that. This is going to be things like Deduction, and Vicious Blow, your weapons, your spells for Mystics. Mm-hmm. The cards that let your deck actually do things. And then right at the tippy top, we have Fun. And these are just your throw-ins.
Yeah, generally for me, the fun is 4 to 6 of my 30 cards.
Yeah, and a less optimistic word for the fun would be filler.
Yes.
But
it's the cards that you're like, man, I really want to try this out, and I think I'm going to put it in here because it's the best home for it. Yeah. Or it's I love this shitty-ass jank card, and I want to play it here. For me, even though, it could feasibly fit into purpose or function, I view Hawkeye Folding Camera as a fun card that just makes it into my deck a lot of the times. Because really it's also those cards that sometimes you make the decisions that are less optimal to play the fun card. Or
yeah, sometimes the function, the fun parts of the pyramid get a little bit squished. But...
Yes. Yeah. But generally it's pretty easy to say, right? Your purpose is, for example, for me, purpose is just the things that allow me to boost my book up or get... is purpose and function also kind of live in the same kind of nebulous zone, right?
Yeah.
But, to me, function... It enhances your purpose, right? It makes your purpose more reliable, right? That function is where your reliability of your deck comes in.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the purpose is just the idea behind your deck, and then the function is the cards that actually do it. Mm-hmm. But so only the top 3 layers are actual cards in your deck.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. So this is a great question because we're going to be touching on this a lot more. So. Generally, how does your deck makeup look at this pyramid? If you were going to just, gather, a 30-card deck, generally, how much do you... I know there's, obviously, factors that change all this, but, just,
we have, an investigator, which is, fulfills our purpose, because that's quite often, the investigator you choose lends you towards a certain playstyle. Not always, but... and then I usually try to play, 4 to 6... resource generating cards depending on the deck and stuff, and then usually again another 4 to 6 card draw or card selection options for that, which might not always be preposterous sketches or deep knowledge. It can be stuff like Prepare for the Worst falls into that.
Yep.
And then function. Function's a little bit tougher because it depends on what you're trying to do, and again it depends on how seriously you're making the deck. The fun and the function are a little bit more malleable than the other two, but I've accounted for I guess 10 cards, 4 and 6 on or 5 on average of each, and we'll say 10 function cards and 10 fun cards, or 12 function cards and 8 fun cards, I guess.
Yeah.
That counts for 5 to 6 weapons for a fighter. For the easy one, and then a couple of allies to not die, maybe 4 of those.
Yep.
And then some vicious blows.
Yeah. Mine's very similar. I don't get out of bed for a deck with less than 4 economy. I don't want to even look at a deck with less than 4 resource cards. Yeah. And I usually do 4 to 6 of each of them. Card draw as well. Card draw, for me, it depends on the investigators, but generally I think 10 to 12 is a good area to live in.
For the card draw, it depends on what your investigator's trying to do, right?
Yes.
If you're playing a fighter who just wants to smack things with Time Worn Brand, you don't need to draw lots of cards. You just need to draw Time Worn Brand.
Exactly, yeah.
So.
And then fun. I mean, my fun is usually, yeah, like I said earlier, 6 cards. It can be more if I'm memeing it up a little bit. Yeah. But the thing is, we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's a lot of points. Follow the Great Deck Pyramid. It's a great tool for you to look at how you want to approach your deck building. Let's get to the next point, which is make sure you have good economy, card draw, and resources.
Yeah, like I mentioned in the Deck Pyramid, you can't play the game if you don't. You can't play the game if you don't have cards to play.
Yeah.
And you can't play those cards if you don't have the resources to play them. So, economy and card draw tend to be a little bit inversely related as well, where the more resource generation you need, the less card draw you need, and the more card draw you need, the less resource generation you need. Where, if your deck's full of 0-cost cards and skills, you don't need to produce resources because they're free. That being said, you're going to be playing lots of cards because they're free. So you're going to need more card draw to get them.
Definitely.
But if your deck is playing, just dumping lightning guns and stuff into play, that costs 6.
That's a lot of money.
It does a lot of work on its own. And get multiple uses out of it. You don't have to necessarily... You're not going to be playing 3 cards a turn. You're going to play your lightning gun and you're going to use it. And that's 2 turns worth of actions, probably. Yeah. So then you want more resources because each of your individual cards cost more.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, too, that your resources will change depending exactly on the curve of your deck, right? If you notice you're building your deck and you're like, ooh, man, I got a good example is Tommy Muldoon. Because Tommy Muldoon, while he has resource generation built into his actual investigator card, it's delayed resources. You can't count as that as your economy, right?
Yeah, you need you need something to start. Tommy's a little bit tough to build because of that, actually, because you need resources that start to develop your board state. But once things start dying, then you don't need resources anymore because you're getting resources back. What you need is card draw.
Yeah, or what you need is Becky to turn those resources into beautiful bullets. So, if you're playing a Tommy with Greta Wagner, actually there's a list this Saturday coming out, your Tommy deck with Michael Lee.
Amazing.
Yeah, and Greta Wagner, and those are 2 5-cost allies. You need good economy to ensure that you can play those.
Hey, you can't get resources back until you've played them the first time.
And then also you can't depend on that as well, because if they die to his weakness, that's it for that money that you maybe had on layaway.
Yep.
Your investment crashed.
Made a rookie mistake.
The inverse of this is, for example, Silas Marsh, right? Where it's a little bit funny because the only real resource generation you need if you're doing a heavy skill deck is your Unrelenting, right? And that goes the world. But you need to make sure you have to, as you're building your deck and you know what your goal of your deck is and how you're going to accomplish that, to always ask yourself, do I have enough economy? And if you feel like the answer, if you're maybe I do, put 2 more cards in.
Yeah, you should. If you're not confident, it's better to have more economy than too little, because when you upgrade your deck, you always take them out.
Yeah,
it feels a lot better to take out your extra emergency caches or whatever for some cool 4 experience card than it does to have to take out something for emergency cash.
Yeah. And the majority of the economy in the game besides emergency cash commits for symbols, right?
Yep.
So they're not dead. And don't be afraid to commit those but as Travis said, if you're I don't need this emergency cash anymore, just turn it into emergency cash 2 because that card's phenomenal. It's money and cards now. It's even better. With all this said, never cut your economy. Card draw and resources.
Of course.
Now, we did just say if you notice that you don't need your economy, it's fine to trim down. But if you're my economy is in a good place, do you know what I want to do? I want to get rid of this e-cash, right?
Yeah, it's really easy, especially when you're newer to the game or less experienced, to discount the value of those economy cards and be I don't want to play with this card because it's not cool. Emergency cash isn't cool. Lightning gun's cool.
Yeah.
The Eye of Truth is cool.
It is cool.
But they don't let you play other cards.
Yeah. And this is actually where, going back to the deck building pyramid, works really well, because in theory, these cool-ass cards you're putting in are fun, or in the case of Lightning Gun, functional, right? So you should, instead of looking at cutting from the lower level of your pyramid, you should cut from the level that it comes from. That's actually probably the best advice for upgrading. When you're trying to figure out what to cut, make sure you're taking from the same layer that card came from.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, do the Justin way, which is just turn your fun cards into even more function and just get even more efficiency. But realistically too, at a certain point, you should also, if you're not one who likes to add economy into your deck or you like to cut your economy, you should go out of your way to try a campaign where you put economy into your deck, right? Mm-hmm. Like
the game's a lot easier when you can play emergency cash to get 3 resources instead of having to spend 3 actions getting those 3 resources.
Yeah, and like that's the thing. Like, it's okay if part of your downturn you're like, I'm gonna gain a resource to get a money
that's
here.
not the end of the world.
Yeah, and like even like that's depending on the weaknesses in your deck, that's a pretty common way to end a turn, right? But if you're like, I played Leo DeLuca and I'm going to use 4 actions to gain 4 resources, that's
not a good.
That's not a good sign, especially because then you get Crypt Chill and your Leo DeLuca goes in the bin.
Yeah, now your 2 resources an entire turn in the hole.
Yeah, so like your economy should never get cut. You can trim your economy if you're in excess, which can happen, but you never want to just gut your economy completely because it'll be a bad
especially
time.
Like if you're like, again, don't cut them for high resource cost cards.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest advice to come from this, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're going to add something, if you're going to increase the curve of your deck, and the curve of your deck is
how many resources your cards cost.
Yes. There's a great graph of it on ARKHAM for each of your decks if you do that, and it's a great way to look at it to see what it is. If your curve is going to trend higher as you upgrade, you're going to want to make sure you never cut your economy and potentially even add some more in as you get going. Because there's some great economy options at higher experiences. Stand Together 3, Emergency Cash 2.
Leadership 2.
Leadership 2 is a fantastic economy card. Yeah. There's the new red one, Salvage, which is also really good.
Protecting the Anarike.
Yeah, very
Sacrifice.
good. Yep. Yeah, there's lots of great level 0 Seeker cards,
Except
Crack the Case, Burning the Midnight. Well, they have the new Salvage now, which I think is actually a really good.
I haven't had a chance to play with it, so.
Yeah, that one's some nice economy. Yeah, because the red, all you really have is your take cards.
Yeah. And Drawing Thin.
And Drawing Thin. Yeah. But that's why you just build a skill-based red deck. All right, what do we got next for our next tip here? If you build around Jank, make your deck support at 100%.
Yeah, so I talk about this in one of the How to Win videos about building Jank. Again, you sort of have, when you build Jank, you're basically turning, if you're building around like the bar or something as a weapon, and you want to try and make it work, you're basically turning the function of your deck, the part of your pyramid, into the fun part. Which means you need an even stronger base. So like it's okay to play like kind of janky, kind of bad economy cards as long as what you're getting to still lets you play the game well or makes up for it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's fine if it takes you an extra action because your resource cards are kind of awkward or whatever to play your flamethrower, as long as you still get to kill like 3 dudes with 1 action or something like that. It's also fine to, be dropping the bar and spending extra action killing things as long as your economy is nice and tight and you can find it consistently and you can play it and have it with the ammo to use it when you need it to. When you run into an issue is when you're playing like crappy economy and then you don't have the resources to play your bar and you don't have the cards to find your bar, and then you get your bar into play and you're still not playing the game well because it's a bad weapon.
This goes even further too, that if you want to build around Jank, not only does your function and your economy need to be better to ensure that, you also want to go 100% in on that. So instead of like, this is something that I see in other card games a lot, as well, is that people like, you see all the cool cards and you're like, I want to put them all together into a soup and stir it up and see what happens. That's a bad idea.
That can't all be bad cards.
So like, you should think about like what fun thing you want to do with your deck, and then just go on that 100% and then save the other ideas for the next time you build a deck.
Yeah.
Because then like if you go all in on the bar as this example, you're actually more likely to succeed in doing that, right? And then once again, this support starts at the economy. We can't repeat that enough, right? Like finding cards, finding your thing, there's an example. It hasn't been on the channel yet. It's gonna hit the stream. It's gonna hit the YouTube eventually. But I built around Flute of the Outer Gods, right?
Oh, yeah.
The card does nothing. The card's bad. But I wanted to see if I could because it was like my white whale for a long time.
Yeah.
And with successful building around, I was able to get 10 curse tokens on it, right? It did nothing. But it shows that with a strong base, and if you're going 100% on something, you can actually achieve those things.
Yeah, when you're playing with a card that you think might be bad or kind of janky, then you want to give it the best shot to shine that you can.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, you might as well put it in the most optimal place, and if, like, through the Air Gods, it still turns out to be garbage, you know, what can you do?
Yeah, you're just like, you're like, I did it.
Yeah, like, I played it to the best of this card's ability, and it was still bad.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Make sure your deck scales with the campaign.
Yeah. So this one is, like, your plan as a fighter... always the fighters, because it's the easy one to talk about.
Yeah.
You're gonna spend all campaign hitting people with machete. Easy. You're playing Zoe Samaras or whatever, rolling banks, you got 4 punch, you got 5 to your machete, you're feeling pretty good about yourself, chopping up cultists, chopping up ghouls, chopping up rats.
You're like, I'm never gonna lose.
Yeah, and now it's scenario 6, and you have 5 punch, and the enemies also have 5 punch.
Yeah.
And that's not a good place to be. So you need to make sure that the cards adding to your deck aren't, like, keeping your deck's power level flat. They need to be ramping up with it. You need to be playing things like, you know, you need to be upgrading, or playing beat cops and upgrading them so you can get over that 4th damage without spending another action. You need to be upgrading your vicious blows for the extra symbols, and then, again, for that extra damage. You need to be upgrading into stuff like the Ace of Swords for the extra punch. Like, you need to be able to keep scale with the game. Chaos bags, for the most part, stay relatively static throughout the campaign. Sometimes usually they go up by like a bump. On normal, first half of the campaign, I'm usually looking at like -2, and the second half of the campaign is usually like -3. I want to be able to beat, because the symbols typically get tougher. So yeah, your deck needs to reflect that increase in difficulty.
Yeah, and like this is. It's kind of one of the things, too, why why clue getters have an easier time is because shrouds don't really scale. Shrouds kind of stay static, but enemies do, right? Yep. At the same time, too, also, Mythos cards generally can, like, especially, like, the encounter set specific ones, can scale with the game, but this is, like, really important as a fighter. You need to be, especially also, like, a potential, like, influx of enemies. Like, what are you going to do if there's a lot of them?
Well, it applies to the clue getters too. You don't necessarily need to be able to beat shrouds more consistently, but you need to be able to get clues faster.
Yeah, you need more action compression, and that's where you see things like Pathfinder come into play. Why that one's so good, because it's just like you turn your move actions into other things. Same with like Safeguard. Like Safeguard is a good example of how to easily just make your deck scale a bit more as well, because you then spend less actions moving. It means more efficiency in what you're doing, but also just like efficiency is also removing the need to take actions you don't want to take.
Yep. And tying that back to the encounter deck getting more difficult as the game goes on as well. Like, theoretically, if you're passing encounter tests, say 25 or 75% of the time for an easy number in the early game, and then in the second half of the campaign, your team's only passing them 50% of the time, then the less Mythos phases, that you need to have less Mythos phases in the game to make up for that, so you don't drown under the weight of those failed skill tests. And that's where the Seekers really need to ramp things up.
Yeah. I had a point that and this is also why economy is so good.
Yeah.
Because, for example, to go to a card that Travis loves, Leadership, this allows you to pass a test while also gaining money, which means you don't have to spend that money doing other things, and even that is like a form of scaling with the campaign.
The card's worth like a lot of actions, because you give it to someone else, and then they get to pass their test that is worth some amount of actions, whether it's frozen fear or whatever, and then also they get 2 resources, which is worth like slightly less than an action, and you get 2 resources, which is worth slightly less than an action. You're all feeling pretty good.
Yeah, and like it all ties back to economy. That's not even a joke. But yeah, this one is most easily actualized from the fighter perspective. Just be like, how can I deal with bigger challenges that are going to be coming? How can I stay ahead of that with my deck? Last tip here, at least I'm pretty sure this is our last tip, which is don't be afraid to pivot in upgrades if needed.
Yeah.
So some examples of this that happened on our... Well, first we'll say what this means. So say, for example, you are like this... There's too many enemies and I'm not being able to kill them enough, right? I need to go hard and add in another weapon even though it wasn't part of my plan.
Yeah,
right?
or like you built, so you're playing like minor mechanic spoilers, I guess, but you're playing like Dream Eater's campaign blind, and you just built your Guardian deck. You're like, I'm gonna kill 3 health enemies all day, and the game's like, hey, check it out. There's a bunch of swarm enemies instead. Maybe instead of upgrading your 45 on max, you're looking at turning those into like Mark 1 grenades or something, or dynamite blasts to deal with those swarm enemies more efficiently.
I think this also comes into play too, if you follow the official rules where you roll your basic weakness last and you don't do any sort of things like draw 3, remove 1, get 1 of 2 random, and you get a dendromorphosis when your name is Leo Anderson. This has happened through the last 3 times I've seen Leo get played. It's kind of wild.
Suddenly Brandicathaga might be what you're looking to play.
Yeah, Brandicathaga picking up a bandolier. One thing I did is I built then a combat event focused Leo, and it worked very well. So it's just like being one of those things where it's like, this is like not something that's going to come up all the time. A lot of the time you're going to have your deck plan and you're just going to like get it done.
Yeah, you just, the campaign goes as expected, and you upgrade the cards that you thought you were going to, and you have a good time.
Yeah, but then sometimes it doesn't. Like, another example was I was playing Parallel Agnes, and we got overwhelmed with enemies, so I was like, I just need to add a kill spell in here.
Storm of Spirits or whatever.
Like, I just need to add something in here that wasn't part of my plan, but I'll pay a little bit of a premium on this down the rabbit hole just to do it. Like, don't be afraid if you're like, if it costs you more experience than you want to just get it in there, because you're probably it's going to be more reliable.
Yeah, you can look at it as an investment too. Like, you're spending experience on it now, and it might not be what you want to spend your experience on, but being able to do better in the scenarios and respond to the challenges that the campaign's providing you is going to result in more victory later.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you notice that you don't have enough economy, don't be afraid to put in more economy.
I mean, like, there's some really good leveled up economy cards.
There
like
is. On the Hunt, yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, that's another good one.
Yeah. We've talked about it.
Yeah, we did list them earlier.
There's like that joke in Commander for Magic, which is play more removal, because like a lot of players don't play enough removal in their Commander decks. That's, I think, the point here for this. Play more economy.
Yeah.
It's boring, but it makes you play your not boring cards better.
It does.
That was the end. Look at that.
Perfect.
Wow. I hope you enjoyed this list video. We'll be back to 3 cards that define Mystics coming up next Thursday.
Okay.
That's what we're doing, I think. Yeah, well, once Bryn's back. That's where Travis sits, but this is where Bryn is in my soul right now.
Yeah, that's where the empty space is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it'd be weird if I was like, once Bryn is back, and you're
that
like,
would be really
like I'm Travis. But thank you so much. If you have any questions or other list videos you want to see in this vein, let us know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one. And as always, GG's.